So, in regards to One Crazy Summer, question one of expectations, I think for the expectation of the girls, of adults with the girls in their experience of traveling to Oakland was they're kind of taught, how to, react to people and really kind of how to stay in line and not like, have a saying or have a word. Basically, not drawing attention to themselves. I got this from page 5 when Big Ma mentions to the main character about how they need to act right because there are a few of us and many of them. So that will obviously go into racism, which will be the next topic that I'll talk about. But it's more along the lines of how they were taught by Big Ma and Pa of when they're around people of different minorities, of not drawing crazy amount of attention to them and how guilty they may feel of that. This can be seen when she's on the plane and and the main character looks out the window and tries to see the Golden Gate Bridge, and then her sisters cause a ruckus, and then she's embarrassed, and all she heard was, and then head shaking. So like that guilt of like, oh, everyone's got eyes on me. Like, I think Big Ma and Pa really did not want them to have that, so they expect them to kind of stay in line and stay out of trouble. And then it shifts to Cecile and their mom in Oakland, who kind of doesn't really, understand them, or kind of just has a different lifestyle. I personally think, it kind of shows like from the aspect of when the girls come in there, like on page 24. They just assumed that she lived in poverty and she was just poor and just had all this stuff going on. I mean, she had a nice, decent house based on the description and detail, so it wasn't crazy poverty. Obviously, it's a very different aspect of Oakland, California to New York City, Brooklyn. But she just has a different aspect of the girls. Like, when they got to the house, they talked about how they don't want to cook out. They want to actually cook. They don't want to do takeout anymore. And their mom was just like, that's not my problem. You figure it out. And it kind of brings it all in full circle because on page 26, they got the feeling based upon the facial communication that she looked at all the girls of like, what are these girls? Like, they're raised differently from what I think that she would expect them to be. I think instead of like wanting all this stuff and getting all the stuff that they want, that they got to work for it, and it's nothing's ever easy. I think that's the expectation that she has, and I think it's different because Big Ma and Pa raised them differently than what she would have wanted. And then this kind of goes into the next expectation of when they're at the center with the Black Panthers. They kind of have, a very high standard when it comes to, recognizing themselves and what they want. They're kind of in the expectation of like fall in line and do as you're told, like believe that you're a part of this, you are a part of a revolution, you can make a change, you can be a part of something, like, and you actually have a voice, but also this is how it is, and if you're not on board, get out of here. I kind of look at that and it really shows like it's kind of like a catch-22 a little bit. Like on page 64, she talks about the people at the center are not Pop grown and not Cecile grown. So there's a big difference between their standard expectations of, fall in line, do as you can, be a part of the revolution, speak, don't wait. Don't kind of hide in the back like Cecilia or like the daughter would do on the plane. Like, take a step forward and actually like, man up and speak for yourself, to have respect for yourself. I mean, a lot of it all ties into, race and racism with these experiences because, I mean, they're all African American. They're all in different backgrounds in different parts of the area. I think from the aspect of, Big Ma and Pa, they're more trying to make sure that the girls are solely taken care of, by being a little bit of controlling, but also giving them everything that they want. Like this can be seen in a couple of the chapters where they talk about they want night beds and they want this and they get this, where their mom is just like, no, hell, not up in here. And that plays a big part, especially at the center, because it's a whole new perspective and world for them, and they don't really understand about it. Like, you look at the difference, and we'll talk about this in the next one, of when they're at the center and they talk about the difference between being colored and being black. Like, it's just perspective, I feel like, and that's what it kind of shows. So and each location is also different, because I mean, you have New York City. I mean, New York City was kind of be on the hierarchy of places to be, and then California is kind of in the lower part. So the poverty scale and the social scale and the economic scales are really two different complete areas. So the expectations and the way that they raise kids and what they actually teach them are completely, different. I mean, you look at the teachings in the center, like the way that like their school was like teaching them about, trying to take like social injustice and all this stuff and try to relate it to them, which makes it, in the realism. But then you have like when they're probably in Brooklyn at actual schools, they probably don't know that. I mean, it's hard to tell, you don't know, but I mean, it kind of shows two different spectrums of the girls and what they're experiencing, and then how do they react to it as well. So I think that's all my notes for question 1. Yep. So question number 2, the significance between Cassius Clay and Ali is interesting. It's definitely based upon what it says in the book. It says, Clay, you hear the clash of fists like a plane getting jabbed and punched. Ali, you see a mighty mountain, greater than Everest, and can't no one knock the mountain down. So it kind of shows of when Cassius Clay was really like that rock star, that awesome boxer, and then when he changed his name to Muhammad Ali with all the racial background and all that stuff going on, it really proves that he now stands for something, even mightier than ever before. When it comes to the Idlewild and the JFK, that talks about when Big Ma like refuses to call JFK Airport JFK, because she was been around when it was called the Idlewild Airport for a while, and it had nothing to do with in regards to JFK, and when he died, it wasn't really a racial thing. I think that's more of a symbolic way of people are just so used to one thing and they're afraid of change in a way. I think Fern and Little Girl, as it says in the story, it talks about how Cecile refuses to call Fern by her real name because Pa didn't let her get to pick the name, and she got upset about it, which makes sense. So it makes sense a little bit on Cecile's part, but it also makes sense on Fern's part of not, agreeing and liking being called Little Girl. It's a little bit of an identity thing, because I think she's happy and proud of who she is. That's, kind of how her grandparents taught her, and that's what she's getting with a lot of the with the Black Panthers, of like being confident of like who you are, what your background is, and where you're being, and then just kind of being called a little girl is a little bit disrespectful, at least from her perspective. Definitely the respect when it comes to the difference between colored and black. As people of different color, we have a tendency of labeling and all of that, but also we just don't really understand what it's like to be like the minority, like to be colored or to be black. So like we can go around and just say, that's a colored person, which in the story, as it says, that's what the girls were referred to. I'm assuming that was taught them by like her Big Ma and Pa about it. But then now when they go to the Black Panthers, it's like, no, you're not colored sisters, you are black sisters. It's more of an identity of trying to figure out who exactly they are, not just in a small spectrum. Like there's a bigger spectrum that you're a part of that you don't really realize that. And then the last one is Cecile, Mother, and Zelia, or Nazalia. I don't know how to pronounce it, to be honest. I know it talks about how the mother is a statement fact. I know the girls talk about how it's a statement fact and it's not mom or mommy or mama. Like mother is just a statement and that's it. Like she's our mother, but not really our mother. Like mom, does a lot for us. It talks about in the book how a mama, changes us, gives us water, and, they actually take cares of us. But then you look at Cecile, and she has a hard time of comparing herself as the mother because she has a little bit of a, not identity crisis, but she has such power and high standards with herself and her poems and where she is with the Black Panthers and the movement, that her poems are so powerful to change the world that she wants to go by this different name. So it seems to me that all of these different names really highlight identity. I think identity is really a big part of this book, and really trying to find who you are in the world and what you are capable of doing. I find that because you look at the example of Cecile actually took the chance with all her poems and where she is with the Black Panthers and actually changed her name. So it wasn't the fact that she didn't like her name. She just felt, I think, in her heart, based upon the stories or the literature, is that she really feels that her powers are so important and she's so captivated with the culture and where she's at with it that this will help express the her words and what she wants out there. Definitely, if you look at Fern and Little Girl, you look at identity. You're trying to figure out who you are. One person has one perspective of who you are, and then someone else has a different perspective. And that's kind of really the basis of the book, I feel like. I feel like the book brings three girls into a completely different area, and then another different area within that area, and just around a bunch of different people with different agendas and different focuses and different, social collaborations within themselves, that they're trying to figure out where do they fit in this open world. And, being called Fern and then being called Little Girl, you can have that moment of opportunity where you're like, well, I'm not a little girl. I'm me. I know exactly who I am, and that's good to have that power. But then if you have the perspective of, well, if you were raised this way and you were taught that, but now here's a different perspective. And I think it's trying to figure out, where they all fit in the world and how they're sometimes they're a little bit afraid of change. I mean, if you go through a couple of the chapters, you hear the girls always questioning, a lot of things going on, and they like it, they don't like it. The middle girl, I can never remember her. Verdetta, I think it is. Enjoys her time at the Black Panther conference, but then little Fern is not having such a good time, especially when they took her doll, Miss Baby Cakes, and colored her in because she was white. I think it's just a lot of different perspectives going on, and it's really, again, trying to figure out where they belong in the world and where they're at culturally. How do they fit? How do they belong in Cecile's world? How do they belong in this Black Panther world? Should they be involved with it? So I think it raises a lot of questions, and I think it gives a lot of answers at the same time.